Board of Adjustment meeting for May 9th, 2024. And just an FYI, on the agenda, it mentions a citizens' general discussion, and I just want to apprise everyone that for every single case that we'll be hearing this afternoon, there will be a public hearing. And so there will be plenty of time for focused discussion, but it looks like the agenda says that I'm supposed to open up the floor to general discussion. So is anyone here to make a generalized comment? And if so, please come to the podium, introduce yourself, and then make that comment. It's a new thing that we've been instructed to include in the agenda, so that's what we're doing. You're welcome. Okay, well, the agenda before us includes several items, and one of those, of course, is to consider the approval of the minutes from our last meeting, which just happened to be not last month, not the month before, but February 15, 2024. So, do I hear a motion to approve those minutes, which have already been published?
I move that we approve the February 15, 2024 minutes.
Second.
Thank you very much. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion, any friendly corrections or amendments? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
It's unanimous. And I'll sign those after the meeting. Yeah. Okay, so now we have 6 cases. 3 of them are related to each other, 2 of them are not. But we'll start off with case number V 2024-008. Steve, would you please introduce that to us?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Applicant Darius Diaz is requesting a variance from section 154.21.3C. This is a variance for the construction of a carport at 1490 West Park. This is block 12, lot 2A of Charlton Heights Edition. Ms. Diaz is requesting a variance for the construction of the carport that will allow for a 13.5-foot rear setback, so a 11.5-foot reduction in the 25-foot requirement. And if you will, please scroll down to the illustration. She has a site plan included for us, and that is going to be, we have all the city maps, and then what I wanted to call your attention to is on page 12 of the PDF. And if you look at it's turned a little, the layout is different than what you're seeing on the map. It's turned inverted. But if you look at the top part of her illustration, she shows where the new carport will be, and the fence is identified on her illustration. So the rear setback will be reduced by that carport, and with the reduction of the 24-foot depth of that carport, she will only have 11.5 foot from the edge of the carport to the fence. However, she will still maintain the 25-foot corner setback because she is at the edge or the corner of Lillian and Park Street. So I'm hoping that makes sense to you. The illustration is on the TV there for us to refer to.
I think you said 11, but I thought that the request is for 11.5-foot variance from a 25-foot rear setback, which would make it a 13.5-foot.
Thank you, sir. That is correct.
Okay, just if anyone didn't think I was paying attention.
So the variance will be for the rear setback, reducing to the 13.5 foot.
Thank you so much. Is Doris Diaz here? If you could come up and to the podium and then just state your name, and then if you want to add anything to your appeal here.
Sure, I'm Darius Diaz.
Yes.
And that's my drawing. Okay, and I will say, since I submitted that, I'll just let you know, there's actually 5 more feet to deal with, less, which is good, from myself to the fence. Because when they gave me the original drawing of the carport, they gave it to me backwards, so I drew it the way they gave it to me. So it's technically 20 feet wide instead of 24 foot wide. It's 20 wide, and it's 25 long. So it goes further back into the yard but it's more narrow in the yard from myself to the neighbor. Does that make sense?
So your actual reduction will be down to it'll be an 18-foot
Yes.
setback instead of a 13.5.
Yes,
Thank you
yes.
for the clarification on that.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, I think we can still move forward on that because the variance is less than what was requested.
Okay, that's good to know. Very good. So ultimately, it's a request for a variance of only 6.5 feet.
Yes,
Okay.
that would be correct.
And
That-
the resulting setback would be 18.5 feet, it sounds like.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay, that does, well, it makes a difference. Right. Any questions for Ms. Diaz from the board? It sounds like there are no questions, so thank you very much. You can have a seat.
Okay, thank you.
I will ask if there are any citizens here who would like to speak to or for or against this request. I do have a letter from Martha Vasquez and Saul Juarez, and it's a letter of support. And so we'll open up the public hearing by introducing that letter as well. So the letter is so forth. Here's the note. I'm writing in response to the letter we received for the construction of a carport at 1490 West Park, Stephenville, Texas, to applicant Darius Diaz. We are standing in support of Mr. Diaz's request for the construction of their carport. I'm thinking Mr. and Mrs. Right. As neighbors, we see no issue whatsoever with this request. Martha Vasquez and Saul Juarez. And I think everyone received. All right. Are there any others who want to speak to this request? All right, we'll close the public hearing, and I'll ask the board if I hear a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve case number B2024-008 on the variance, the carport.
Second.
And we don't need to stipulate those.
I think just for future city records, I would reflect
And
that.
and
it's
what was
for
the
a-
final,
it's
18?
18.5, I believe, is the.
For the variance of the
Yeah.
18.5.
Well, it's a variance of 6.5.
6.5, I'm sorry.
With the result of
Right.
18.5 foot setback. Okay, very good.
Yes, sir.
All right, we have a motion and a second, and do we need to discuss, anyone? All right, I'll call the question. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
None opposed? All right, your request was approved. Very good. All right, now we have three related proposals. It sounded like the language said that for the whole project to go forward, each request has to be made. You did mention to me before the meeting that there is room for negotiation on, I think it was V 2024-10. We're not there yet, but just that's true, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
The parking request, the
Yeah.
parking variance
Okay.
request, the way it was presented and the way it was published, it basically has said that they're wanting a consideration for a variance from the 1.5 requirement.
Okay.
So the board will be able to entertain, and I think they have different site plans to share with you.
Okay.
So the board will be able to entertain, a variance based on what the board may feel comfortable with.
Okay, thank you very much. Would you please present to us V 2024-009?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Applicant Rock Creek Property Number 1 LLC is requesting a variance from section 154.56B3. This is relating to the occupancy requirements for the property located at 0 West Cedar Street. This is in the H.C. Hudson abstract. It's parcel R78345, and this is, of course, for the city of Stephenville. The developer, Mr. Tim Fleet, and his team are here tonight, and been working with Landon Darwin quite a bit over the past few weeks preparing for this. And the gentleman here, Steve, he was involved on the front side of the project quite heavily. So we've been in communication with this group for quite a while. and they're offering to bring a project to the city that would allow for student housing. The request that is before you at the moment is for a multifamily dwelling. They are proposing multifamily units that would have more than 3 bedrooms and allow for more than 3 unrelated persons per dwelling. And so if you refer to your packet, section 5.6.B3 specifies that multifamily dwellings, each limited to 3 unrelated persons, may submit a variance request for units designated to occupy more than 3 unrelated persons or students per unit. That's where we are tonight for this particular request. If I would like to share with the board that we do have student housing complexes across the city that have 4 and 5 bedroom units, and those have been approved and currently in existence today. They went through the plan development process, and so those concessions were made through a plan development. But this is a specific mechanism to allow the developers to make this request to the Board of Adjustment. And so with that, Mr. Chair, I'd be glad to answer any questions. For this particular case, I think staff would be comfortable with the variance because of the fact that it's not unique to the community. We already have similar structures in the city already. So be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you so much. Do you have any questions, board, for Steve?
Can you answer, is there a reason that they're going this route versus the plan development?
It's timing for this project is of essence, and they have a closing date that's pending, and they need to move quickly. If we went through the plan development process, it's going to add at least an extra month to the review.
Are we sure this is gonna be 100% student housing? Or student living?
He's asking
That's the
what
way
I'm
it's being
asking.
presented.
Is there any way to guarantee that it's just students?
Actually, I'm not sure if that's even
Can I
relevant
even ask that
to
question?
the discussion. If it's not student living, then I would say the parking requirement is reduced, because then you'll be dealing with families that may have a mom and dad and a couple of children, and the limit, the bedrooms may be utilized, but they may be utilized by non-drivers. And so I don't know that if it's really germane to the
Well,
request before you.
that's a best case scenario. Worst case scenario, you have a number of people who decide to live in one apartment, however many beds they can fit in there, and without the restriction, they can, obviously, there's gonna be some occupancy.
That'd be a different enforcement mechanism. So,
But if you're saying 5 different people who are unrelated but also aren't students are living here,
so instead of debating the requirements,
Okay.
I think if you're uncomfortable with it, you let your vote reflect that.
okay.
The mechanism is defined, and so instead of trying to convince you one way or the other, I think you just vote how you feel you're most comfortable with.
Please keep in mind that there are 3 different cases, and this one case is about occupancy number, not who's in it, but the occupancy actually is regarding student. In the materials you presented to us in the actual ordinances, it does relate to student living. So I think if that's what this variance is about, then I think that's how we proceed, as opposed to hypothetical of what might happen if other things were to happen. So, is anyone here to represent Rock Creek property? Okay. Would you please come up and state your name and?
Should the developer have a chance to
Okay?
How many units of a porta pot at that?
That, yeah, that, when we open the public hearing, we'll,
Oh, okay, sorry.
Good evening, my name is Jeff Schneck. My wife Gwen Schneck is here as well. We're the managers of Rock Creek Properties #1 LLC.
thank you. And so you said you're the manager, that you
Of
manage?
the entity. No, I'm not.
The entity.
The entity. The property is undeveloped at
Right.
this point. There's nothing to manage other than a few cows.
No,
So,
I mean, it's a big field, right?
yeah.
Well, with some
Right.
exceptions, yeah.
So we are the owners of the property. The gentleman here to my right are here representing the developers, the buyer of the property.
Okay. And you are the one requesting the variance?
Well,
basically?
yes, I think technically because we're the owners of the property, we're making that request.
All right. Do you have anything you want to say beyond what we have in the?
Well, I think with respect to each one of these variances that are being requested, I think it's very, very important for cities to have standards. If we didn't, good gracious, what would we end up with? But in each one of these cases, I think there's legitimate reasons for the variance for student housing. I think, I can't say this specifically, but I think in each instance, there's a precedent in the city for student housing for these variances to be passed. It seems to me that when you consider these kind of variances, you ought to consider, is this going to be a violation of the core values of our city and its development plan? I'm not sure I know what those core values are. And maybe you guys could articulate that. If you feel like these are in opposition of those core values, you guys might be able to articulate that and help me understand that. But it also seems to me that these variance requests are fundamentally necessary for the development to move forward in a way that's really best for student housing kind of development, which the city badly needs.
What's your vision for how many students would live in each?
I think I'm going to defer that to these gentlemen and let them explain that.
Okay. Would you come up and?
Yeah, absolutely.
Introduce yourself? Thank you.
So I'll ask, because I know we have three in a row here. Would y'all like me to just present kind of it as one, and then we can go one by one on the
We need to
variance
act on
request?
each one, and I think it would probably help.
Just to give kind of an overarching,
in the
okay.
audience, yes.
Yeah, that'd be great. Just don't want to make it complicated.
Would you state your name again for us whenever, and then also you're going to give us a kind of a global picture, but
Yes.
keep in mind that right
Yes.
now we're going to really focus on the occupancy aspect of it,
Right.
and not the parking and not the height.
Got it.
So just for everyone's benefit there.
So we'll leave that there so we have it. So yes. As Steve said, my name's Landon Darwin. I'm here representing the developer and on behalf of the Schnecks. We're with Lackland Holdings. We're based in Fort Worth. And as Steve mentioned, the intent of the variance request is for a student housing project. In front of you, I have just a high-level concept plan. Keep in mind we're at the very early stages of this, but we've made contact with a lot of institutional student housing developers, and we plan to partner with them to build a institutional level student housing project here in Stephenville for Tarleton State. And to the question regarding the unrelated persons, a community like this at this size would be purpose-built for student housing. And I understand your concern regarding, if you grant this variance, what guarantees do we have that this will end up being student housing? There's a lot of communication between us and the city. As you can see on the map, we're planning to bring Harding Road down and Caporal Road down. There'll be lots of discussions with the city on building that road. So there's many more steps between now and then with the city that will need city support to make this project happen. So this is just the first necessary step, of course, to make a student housing project viable. And to the question about the bedroom mix, excuse me, the concept plan we have in front of you is 672 units, which is about 1,900 bedrooms, 1,960 beds. And that's based on a breakdown of about 40% 4-bed, 30% 3-bed, and then 30% 2-bed. So that's, you know, what we've been told is a desirable mix for a student housing project. So that's how we came to the number, and the reason for the variance request would obviously be for the 4-bedroom units.
Landon, would you mind turning that around
Yeah.
so the rest of the audience can see it, please?
They have copies of all these things.
I didn't have a copy of that.
Mm-mm. We don't have a copy of that.
And
So
yeah,
the
with that-
brown, you said was the first phase, and then the yellow was the second phase?
Yes, so, I'm sorry, do y'all not have copies?
We don't
do
have
Oh,
copies.
okay.
Do
So.
you have copies?
I did not bring any, sorry. So the first phase, we'll have the clubhouse, the plans for that are an 8,000 square foot clubhouse, and then eventually 3 2,500 square foot pools. You know, we'll build them as we build each phase, all centrally located because, you know, it's nice to have pools because that's where you tend to have a lot of the activity with college students in a central location versus spread out amongst the community. But yeah, we're, once again, a high-level concept plan at this stage, but, you know, we're partnering with people that have done large student housing developments and making sure we have the appropriate amenities, the appropriate bedroom mix to make this a nice student housing development for Stephenville, for Tarleton.
Let me ask you one more question regarding that previous question that was asked to Mr. Killen, and that is this notion of time being of the essence. Is it with a view to opening for fall 2024? I mean, what is the urgency that we can't go through the other?
Right.
Why are we, this is the last resort board.
Right.
This is the appellate process, you know, this is the place where variances to ordinances that the city council, yeah, I don't have to explain, I know.
Right.
But the bigger picture here is, it sounds like we're talking about a process that would shave off 1 month. And so
Right.
I'm just curious what that sense of urgency is, because if it's for fall 2025, is a month, yeah, so.
You're right, yeah, no,
Please
fair question.
forgive my ignorance about building timelines, because I understand that maybe a month, especially in the summer months, is a really big deal.
Right. Yeah, on that part, yes, of course, you want to have it open and ready for the summer. So the real urgency is our contract with the landowners. We need to make a decision whether to close the property and proceed with the student housing project in July. And so that's why we're here, trying to get, you know, some certainty that we have the support and the ability to make that project come to fruition. So that's the urgency.
Okay, I'll just stop there. Any other questions for Mr.
Darwin, yes, sir.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Stand by, because we
I was
may
gonna say,
have,
I'll-
but you can
say
please
close
just
for
have a
questions.
seat. We appreciate it. We'll open up the,
Mr. Chair, I'm gonna move this over for that side.
very good, yeah. Appreciate that. We'll open up the public hearing. I do have some letters of support, and then, of course, regarding some of the other cases, we have letters of opposition. We have one citizen present, James Smola? Smart? Am I pronouncing that correctly?
Harbin.
Smola, okay.
Harbin is
and-
gonna be right here. This is.
And so-
Hampton. This is.
What I'm gonna do is ask for anybody here who is actually addressing the notion of occupancy requirements. We will have a public hearing for the other cases which deal with parking reduction and height variance. But this specific case is about the occupancy requirements within this zone. So just keeping that in mind. There was one letter of support, and it was from Mr. Greg Bruner from Bruner Motors Incorporated. And you have that, and everyone, I think, received a copy. And basically, do I have to read the whole into the
No, sir,
record?
just the fact it's a letter of support, I think, is all that we really need to have.
Okay, but one note that was in the letter, he was concerned with ingress and egress from Cedar to Lillian. But that was his only issue of concern. He didn't oppose this case. So just for the record, that's one letter. And then the other letters lumped in 009, 010, and 011 together. So we'll address those, I think, as the issue is more about, I hope that's not hail. All right, so anybody here speaking to the variance regarding occupancy? Yes, sir, if you come up and state your name. Did you already fill out a form?
Yes, sir. Would you like to submit that?
To Ms. Cox, please, or to me?
But that's fine, that's fine. Thank you.
If you'll state your name, please, and then you have
Sir.
3 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, board members, thank you very much. Would you like me to address just the?
Your name?
Nathan Collier.
Okay, thank you.
Would you like me to address just
Yes.
the multifamily portion?
Yes.
Okay, I'm not against the development of the property, for smart development of the property. I acknowledge that Tarleton is a student issue and is putting a lot of pressure on the city. I absolutely acknowledge that. My issues with the development as it stands right now is density and compatibility. Really, I'm gonna talk about compatibility for this portion of it. If we miss the mark here, the city and the development south of there and the single-family property, there's a lot of acreage to the south that will be developed as Steve Mill grows with single-family. This current property is zoned as single-family right now, not multifamily. Why are we rushing to cut corners and go through the full process? I know that there's a contract. Due diligence extensions are always given. I know that they're trying to buy it, but those extensions can always be given. So back to compatibility. R1 and R3 housing. Single family butted up directly against multifamily, especially when this size. I understand that there are precedents around the city for the multifamily. The Edge, the Grove, Mustang Ranch, and Creekside are not on this scale and do not have direct contact. They either do not have direct contact with single-family R1 housing, or they have some kind of extensive green space or transition zone to R1 housing. Compatibility with this size development in Stevens on this scale will be a concern. If you put this density, I'm concerned of the further development of single-family south, which will continue. I understand that south of Stevens will continue to grow. So I request that you not allow the multifamily for compatibility reasons. I have other comments for the next one, but I'll hold those for the next rounds. I understand there's precedents, but those are not apples to apples comparisons with the other multifamily in town.
Any questions? Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, just real quick. The density, I will talk about the density real quick. Cedar Street's inadequate. Thousands of students. It's a big one. I understand there's a need for housing, but the thoroughfare plan, everything else, none of that's been vetted. I don't think we've done our due diligence yet on the impacts. Thank you.
Thank you. One more?
Yes, sir.
Hello, Ross McAngus, property owner, resident. This list of variances, it seems rushed. Reiterate a lot of what Nathan said. We need to follow the process and follow the rules and regulations that we have. And as everybody that develops and everybody that builds adheres to. I think that's important. I think that's something that we need to lean on. Does this density also, is it fulfilled with our traffic that we're going to experience on Cedar? it's that plan needs to be wrapped into this whole plan in order for everything to work properly within this section of the city and the rest of the sections of the city. That's as far as this variance, that's my main concern. It's the density that this project is going to present and the planning or lack thereof planning up front that is available. All right, I do not recommend this variance.
Thank you. Anyone else signing for this?
Sorry, I'm obviously the Is it okay if I speak without?
You need to give that to Ms. Cox, please.
What,
Mary?
while we're waiting for her to, or is she ready? I had another quick
Yeah,
question
let-
for Steve real quick.
I had one too, so that's good.
In terms of occupancy, do the city services, will they meet the demand for
Yes.
this type of project in that area?
Uh,
Do they
yes.
currently meet that, or?
They currently meet it, and if they do not, during the development review process, the developer would be required to meet their demands
Would that be,
through an improvement through the utilities. Currently, we think that we can meet the demand. There's a significant water line very close to the property, and it's right next to the sewage treatment plant, the station, so, as far as
And-
infrastructure, water and utility, it's there.
in any necessary increase in demand, if that was determined to be necessary, who would that expense fall on? Would that fall on the city if we can't meet the demand, or would that be on the developer?
The developer would be required to pay for the infrastructure improvements to serve that particular development. And if we wanted anything above that, it would be on a pro rata basis, and the city would pay for the upsize between what is required of the development and what the city is asking to be installed.
Okay. Did that?
Yeah, so, I mean, my question basically to allay concerns, but also to address them, and that is, would those concerns that have been raised regarding density and compatibility, have they not been already addressed in the process of application? And I know there are a lot of meetings before these meetings, so
Yes.
could you please give us any insight into any of those concerns that we wouldn't be able to address, but that you have insight into?
Well, I think I just basically answered that question, but let me try to rephrase it a little bit. We've had multiple meetings with Lackland. We are aware of what they're trying to build. We know the density. We know the location. Multiple meetings with staff, including Public Works. We've looked at the utilities, including water and sewer. As I mentioned, there's a huge line for both. And if it's determined during the development review process that we need additional water or utility, or sewer utility, then that would be required of the developer as part of the review process. The consideration of the variances doesn't really have an impact on the review, because the review is submitted after we get to the point of if the developer is even gonna proceed with this project. So this is a fact-gathering mission for the developer to make sure that they can move forward with the project with the site plans that they are presenting. And if they can't do it in a way that they feel is profitable, then they won't be here.
Right.
And so we're basically trying to determine if we can meet the variances that they're asking for. And then city staff will work with the developer moving forward to make sure all of those, if the density can be met with existing water and sewer utilities, then terrific. If not, the developer will have to decide if they want to include that as part of their project or not. But again, we have to get to, this is a due process that is given and granted to the developer and the property owner by city ordinance. We're not rushing into things. We're giving them the due process to have these items explored and a decision made. And once a decision is made, then we have to decide then with the developer if they move forward or not. That's where we are.
Very good.
City's not trying to rush through this. It's just one of the first steps in the process.
No, and I wasn't implying that the city was trying to rush
Sure,
through.
it's a fact-finding mission.
Exactly, yeah.
For the city and the developer.
Thank you, sir. Okay, so we
Okay.
have another.
So Joan Christine Boucher is my name. I'm a property owner just off of Cedar on a private road. And a couple of things that I have issues with is, well, number one, the representative from Rock Creek asked the board for you to examine the fundamental core values for Stephenville. And I appreciate the growth of Tarleton. It's so imperative for the city itself. I mean, there have been huge improvements all around town thanks to the Tarleton and all that they've done. But at the end of the day, we also have to understand that nearly 2,000 students, that's a lot of coming and going. How many of them are staying here and flourishing, helping the city of Stephenville grow on a non-student level? And you're putting a lot of pressure on these single-family homeowners that have all of this movement around their properties. Again, as a neighbor of mine mentioned, that the properties that they cite as being similar, they're not really similar at all. You've got a lot of single-family home owners in that area, and this is totally and completely different with the way that that current zoning is structured. So again, the properties aren't similar at all. And again, just to reiterate what my other neighbor said, is the stress that it's going to cause on Cedar. And without seeing what the plans for Cedar are, I feel like we're putting, the cart before the horse, basically, because until we know how this is going to affect, the rush on it is basically so that they can sell the land to develop it in a certain way. And if they don't get that approval, will the purchase of the land still go through? I don't know. But it's rushing it because it's a stunning property, of course. I mean, I would love to live there as a student. That's gorgeous. But is it the right location for it? I don't think so. So I vote again. I would highly ask you to reconsider voting in favor of case number V2024009. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have anyone else in the audience who's here to speak for or against this variance request? 009. All right, we'll close the public hearing. Oh, sorry?
I was just going to address one comment about the density, so just for the board. So our density that we're proposing in this concept plan is a little less than 14 units per acre, and the city R3 regular multifamily zoning allows 24 units per acre. So as far as density goes, obviously, yes, we are planning to ask for a zone change to multifamily, but when it comes to true density of units, we are quite a bit under what is allowed under R3. I just wanted to make sure the board was aware of that.
Great. Thank you very much. We'll close the public hearing on this case, and do I hear a motion regarding case number V 2024-009? We have two choices, one to approve, one to deny. give the board a little thinking time to come up with the proper wording for a motion. We'll have to move one way or the other.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we deny the variance from multiple family, or, sorry, I'm getting the wording wrong here. Again, the variance, I lost my place here. From multiple family dwelling with each family limited as in Division 1, is that correct?
Deny the variance for occupancy above
Occupancy.
more than 300.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Okay, sorry about that again.
No worries.
Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Okay, any discussion?
I'm really torn. I'm just gonna say that. I know we've had some big projects come in. I know we need some big projects. I know we definitely need some more student housing as Tarleton is tearing down, and I would love to be able to bring in some new student housing. This would be a great place for it, especially because of its proximity to the university, but it just feels really rushed to me, and that's what's got me on pins and needles. That in addition to the size of the project, asking for this amount of occupancy for that large of a space, it almost seems wasteful. Wasteful of the land to use it all. I don't know how else to. I don't like the word wasteful, but it seems like I just have a lot more questions than answers at this point.
Would you feel more comfortable if they had gone through the plan development process?
I think so.
Because I agree with you.
Mr. Chairman.
We desperately need more student housing. I'm sorry.
Are we in the discussion or we? Okay.
Any other comments before we take a vote? One thing I will say, and I just, there's a part of me that just is disappointed with that not in my backyard kind of mentality. When things are addressed and the answers are actually very, it's almost like this wouldn't work anywhere if some people's concerns were to be, applied across the board. So anyway, it just feels disappointing on that regard, but I'm just one voice and.
Mr. Chairperson, may I respond to any of these questions or have you closed?
No, yeah, we have two other cases to look at too.
I do
So
have-
I'm just saying that you've said your piece, and I think we've given everyone a chance. Robert, do you want to add anything to the discussion?
No, I'm going to be, I know Tarleton, needs the beds and stuff, but, the process and feeling, and I know Steve said it's not a rush, but I sure do feel like it's a domino effect rush, to get it done. So that's kind of got me in being, on tore apart on this.
Okay.
Here's one caveat that has me leaning that way. In approving the variance, we're not approving a rezoning. They still have to go through the rezoning process, am I correct? So we're just saying that the possibility for this is an allowable possibility. That doesn't mean, yes, it's absolutely going to happen. There's still lots of layers that they will have to work with the city. And the
Yeah, that's my
rezoning is something that they can work through that plan development with the city. If it means that they continue to take a look at this project. But it also protects the rights of our current property owners, their neighbors next door as well, and being able to have their voice heard in terms of the rezoning and what's the kind of growth there. I honestly think this, allowing this variance is not gonna hurt you in that you will still have lots of voice in terms of the rezoning that's allowed, and especially when it comes to if it's a planned development through the city, and I'm talking hypotheticals here because I don't know what their plans are. But approval of this variance tonight just says, yes, we say that this land could potentially be developed into some sort of multifamily. But there's still a lot of legwork that has to be done to determine what that looks like. And I think.
That's my understanding.
With that understanding, I think I would be okay going forward with that.
All
On
right.
the occupancy.
I get it. All right, so,
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
If you will allow, I just want to make one point of clarification on a statement that Ms. Mary Beach made. If these variances are approved tonight, then they move forward with a rezone request, which goes to P&Z and then to City Council. But it is not going to move forward as a planned development request because they will be getting the variances that they need. If they don't get the variances that they need, then they also have the due process to consider going to P&Z for a planned development. The reason I'm making that clarification is I don't want the audience to understand that once they leave here, there's 2 meetings with P&Z and a city council meeting. It could very well only be 1 meeting with the P&Z and 1 meeting with the council. So still multiple steps to work through. And then even if approved, the staff review of the development plan will occur. And that's when we make sure they meet everything other than the variances that were provided tonight.
right.
You know, we're working through a comprehensive plan
Mhm.
right now, and we have hired a consultant. And we are so far behind on housing. And student housing, Tarleton needs 3,000 spots
Mhm.
yesterday.
Mhm.
So there's a huge need for this. I just think it's a project that we definitely need to put some thought into. How you decide on the variances, certainly pleasure of the board, but I want you to know that this is a project that I think offers a lot of relief. This may not be the best location for some people, but right now, housing is being pushed into the existing residential areas all over town.
Mhm.
And so those are all things that I think we should consider as you move forward. And I also think if we looked at the site plan, there's a point that wasn't made, the extension of Harbin will occur with this development. And so access will be from 377 down Harbin and not, I would think that most of the traffic would be through that particular route and not down Cedar. One last point, this will trigger a traffic impact analysis.
Right.
So before you make a decision, I want to make sure you're making an informed decision. I'm not trying to sway the board, but I want you to know every piece of the puzzle as we move forward. Thank you for the chance to address the board.
And thank you. I mean, I've been chairing this board for over a decade and a member of the board for over that. And so I'm aware of that, and I just wanted for all of us to, I appreciate that, that extra insight and feedback. Yes, sir.
Who fits the bill for that traffic impact analysis?
Okay.
The question, Mr. Chair.
Sorry.
The question, Mr. Chair, was who pays for a traffic impact analysis? The developer pays for the traffic impact analysis.
I'm going to call the question on the motion to deny this variance request. All in favor of the motion to deny the variance request, please say aye.
Aye.
All against? By a raise of hands, may I please see who's against, who's for the motion to deny this variance request? All right, I see 3 hands. And all against the motion to deny this variance request, please show me by raising your right hand. All right, so that's 3-2. This variance has been denied. The variance request has been denied. Now, I saw the paper, the wording of the first request said something to the effect of the project can't go forward without that approval.
Well, that would be a question for the developer to
Okay.
ultimately decide.
Oh, I got you. So we'll go ahead, and if you'd please present to us the next case, V 2024-010, please.
This is a variance for parking requirements for the same property as currently read into record. This is section 154.5.6E. In your packet, the highlighted portion, student housing, whereby individual rooms are leased must require 1.5 spaces per rented bed. So as Mr. Darwin pointed out earlier, he has multiple site plans, I believe, with different levels of parking availability for the board to consider. And with that, I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Killen?
I have a question as far as the site plan. Is that considering the variance as is, or?
Needs to be at the public hearing, sir.
Yeah, we're just talking up here for a second. I'll open up the public hearing here in a minute. All right. Thank you. Any questions for Steve from the board? Okay, thank you so much, Steve. Mr. Darwin, do you want to come up and address this issue? Again, now Mr. and Mrs. Schneck, he's your spokesman, right? So, okay. So this actual request regards the amount of, the number of parking spots per people, and it's always a little wonky, the math. because
Right.
It's not a one-to-one, right? It's-
Right, yes.
So if you'd help kind of
Yeah.
just ease us into the whole math part of the
Absolutely.
equation.
Can I-
Yes, please.
This is just something for the board to review while we discuss.
So once again, assuming we are approved for the R3 multifamily zoning, and Steve, you'll have to help me understand, if we don't have the unrelated persons, does the 1.5 spaces per bed apply?
I'm sorry, Landon, present the question again.
Does the 1.5 spaces per bed requirement for parking apply if you don't have more than 3 unrelated persons in the?
Yes, sir.
It
Still
is,
student
okay.
housing.
I just want to confirm that. So, yeah, so the current R3 parking requirements are 1.5 spaces per rented bed. So each bedroom in the unit will have 1.5 parking spaces dedicated towards that bed. And the variance we're seeking is to lower that requirement to 1.1 parking spots per bedroom. And the list I've handed the board is a list of several communities, several cities that have large college presences, large student populations. And, you know, once again, in discussions with some of the groups that build these large student housing complexes, the 1.1 threshold was pretty much the standard. That's what they want. That's what they believe is necessary and required to accommodate, obviously, each bedroom, and then, of course, guests, parents, people who come visit, all the things. So we're asking for a decrease in the required parking from the current R3 zoning, but we believe that comes with the precedent of a lot of communities, a lot of cities, zoning and parking requirements for student housing specifically. And then, so the one on the easel, the concept plan, that is what we'd be asking for. That is the 1.1 parking spots per bed. Thank you, Tim. And that basically comes out to, you know, the current layout in front of you has 1,960 beds. So you would have, you know, 2,162 parking spots. in that, basically, everybody gets a parking spot, a designated area, and then you would have 196 guest parking spots. That wouldn't be accounted for each bedroom.
What was that number again on the spot?
On the spot, so it would be at 1.1, that would be 2,162 parking spots. And keep in mind, the number, it's a ratio, right? So as the bedrooms come down, but basically 10% of however many bedrooms the project has, there'll be an additional 10% of extra parking for guests and other folks.
Mr. Chairman, may I clarify the question that Lehman asked earlier? Want to kind of provide a little more detail on that. So if the project moved forward and it was not being designed as student or purpose-built student housing where you're leasing it by the bed, but you're actually leasing it by the dwelling unit, then the parking requirement actually drops to 2 spaces per dwelling unit. But if you're leasing it by the bed, in that case, it would be a 1.5 per bed requirement.
Without variance.
So it really depends on the business model that we move forward.
Right. Okay. So one point, so just, again, just for any other people who are curious how it's gonna play itself out, there's 1,960 beds. And how many parking places?
That would be 2,162.
2,162.
One thing I'd want to bring up to the board, because I know there's some sensitivity around a particular student housing project on Washington that is pretty dramatically underparked. So that ratio is 0.6 parking spots per bed. So we're nearly doubling that. So they actually don't have a parking spot per each bed. And I don't want to name names, but I think we all know which one I'm talking about. So I understand there's some sensitivity there on a past project, but obviously we expect that we're asking to have a parking spot for every individual bed plus a 10% additional guest parking, regardless of whatever that bedroom count ends up being.
So with the guest spots, you're gonna have 2,358 parking spots in that?
No, sir, no. So there'd be 1,960 parking spots in this theoretical where there's that many beds, and then an additional 196 for guests.
That's where I was going with that, 196 was the addition, During times of high traffic, there are always gonna be those key kind of flashpoints. We see it all the time. I'm a professor at Tarleton, so I know what is your vision of how that plays itself out? You said that some other apartment complex in town have a what, a 0.06?
0.6.
0.6.
Yeah, they don't even have a parking spot for each individual bed.
Yeah.
So that's not, and I know that's some of the sensitivity to, and the reason for the 1.5. But in our conversations, with these large student housing builders, 1.5, you're gonna have a lot of concrete that's gonna sit there empty. Because it's a lot of parking. 1.1 is, like I said, on the list. You've got College Station, you've got Stillwater, you've got Lubbock, you've got cities with very, very large student populations, as is happening here in Stephenville, and they all have at least, 1.1 or under. In fact, Stillwater's is under 1 somehow in the way that they break theirs out. But we're not asking for that, of course. We're just asking for the 1.1, which is fairly standard across, cities with large student populations.
Can I ask, compared to Tarleton and the housing we have on campus, how does that compare to these? I mean, I know Lubbock has a ton of on-campus housing, you know what I'm saying here? So I understand your list and I understand what you're saying, but I'm just saying, if Tarleton is horribly shy of student housing, will that not create issues out there with parking if you have, every bedroom full of a Tarleton student?
Right.
As compared, I know these numbers work for these big colleges, but they also have a lot more on-campus housing.
They also have a public transit
Yeah.
Right.
I'm glad you brought up tech. I'm a Red Raider, so sorry. But yes, in Lubbock, I lived off-site, so I can give my personal story. And, you know, as Tarleton grows and something that these larger multi-student housing will facilitate is public transit. And that's something that every college, as it gets to that pain that I feel Tarleton's in currently, and that's something that the complex itself will help facilitate. And, you know, we'll work with the city, with the university. You know, those are just some of the pains of growth, right? As you grow to that next level, which is where Tarleton, of course, is headed. So,
Okay. Thank you.
and I can go through the others if y'all would like,
The other ones.
the other layouts.
What do the other layouts involve?
Yeah.
Yeah, the other layouts are basically getting closer to the 1.5 standard.
Oh, okay, thank you.
And
Yeah, we didn't get any of these
Yeah.
beforehand, so yeah.
So this would be, would y'all like to just?
Yeah, you can-
Sorry. I mean, it's more or less the same concept plan, but really, what you start losing when you start getting closer to the 1.5 is your green spaces, right, as you pour more concrete.
Right.
And so, the current 1.1 allows for more green, more amenity space. As you continue to add the ratio, of course,
What's
you
that?
get more concrete. So this one is 1.22.
Oh, 1.22.
And this is 1.35, so even with this amount of additional parking, you can see the
It's
fairly
dramatic.
large parking lots. You're still not getting to the 1.5 at this bedroom count. So this is mostly just to paint the picture of the amount of extra parking you would have sitting there, you know, mostly empty, of course, because you'd have, you know, half a parking spot for every bedroom extra.
And you're saying with 1.1 would probably be safe that they won't be parking up and down Harbin Street?
Yeah, there should be, there will be a bedroom for every single resident, and then the guest parking, of course, and, once again, that's several cities' threshold, and talking to several developers of large student housing complexes, 1.1 is more or less the industry rule of thumb in cities who have large student populations where they're from. Now, of course, there's exceptions, but.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Sure. And what I was saying to JJ is, I think our past practice is that we don't take the materials and keep them on our phones and so forth. I mean, if it's for the public record, then that's different, but just turn off the volume for us, that'd be good. So anyway, just, that's different. If the citizens want to take pictures, I guess that's acceptable, but in terms of the board, we're not supposed to keep things for later, right?
Sorry,
Okay.
Dawn.
Any other questions for Mr. Owen on this variance request? Thank you very much.
Thanks.
We'll open the public hearing. I did receive some messages, and I have, there may be more in the room today who want to speak to or against this, and if so, please make sure you've given your form to Ms. Cox. We have opposition letters from Kenneth and Doris Howell, and two different forms of communication from Nick Robinson, a text and a letter, and also there's a citizen present, James Smola. And so, anyone else need to get in line? So, Mr. Collier, you'll come speak to this request again, this request also. So, we'll start by just noting that we had a letter from Kenneth and Doris Howell, and overall, it was a letter in opposition to the variances being requested, and those included 9, 10, and 11. They said they live directly across from the middle of this property, and there's many reasons they say they're opposed, but they're highlighting 6, and so that's in the record here. It's already in your possession, and I didn't. So ultimately, we respectfully ask that you consider not granting these variances to allow the sale of this property for student housing. This is our forever home, and as lifetime residents of Stephenville and Erath County, we do not feel this is the best use for this property. We also received a text Monday from Nick Robinson, and Nick, you're actually here. Did you want to speak to us, or the letters and the text are fine? I did share the text with the board, and we also received your email note. And you're also in opposition to the requests, and basically the concern was about the parking, and so that's why I'm bringing it up here. I'm not going to mention the other apartments that you mentioned, but you did say that when you were on the council, you approved a parking variance for, and I guess the council, it wouldn't have been a parking variance, it would have just been approval for development at that other place, and it ultimately, you said, ended up being a disaster. And you've already addressed, Mr. Darwin, that this is a much, well, you don't have to, just that this would allow for a lot more parking spaces than that one did. Okay, and then the text that you wrote, you're concerned with the quote-unquote staggering number of spaces to be reduced for a development of this size. And you said 70 extra spaces for guest parking at a development of this density is simply not enough. And I think you've heard that it's not going to be 70, it would be 196. Right? So just for the record, that I think may be allayed, that concern. Let's see. You said this city's parking ordinance is neither capricious nor arbitrary and has been reviewed and studied many times in the past. While I want to see a development of this magnitude be completed in our community, I do not support a variance to our parking ordinance. All right, and then we also received a letter not from...
Mr. Chairman, I believe that letter is for a separate case.
Okay, that's what I'm just making sure I've got it. It's for the last one. I have that noted. All right, so I've mentioned, okay, so any other citizens in the room who are present would like to address this variance? I think Mr. Smoley, you're up first, and then Mr. Collier.
And I would like to speak also.
Okay, of course.
I'm James Smola. I own South Loop Pawn and Hobby Shop, so I'm going to be directly north of this thing, which I didn't know anything about at all until we got the letter from the city, and it didn't really even say what this was about. I haven't heard anybody ever complain about there being too much parking anywhere. And we have lots of places here in town that parking is not adequate. My other concern is that if the kids can't trust that they've got a place to come park their vehicles, they're not gonna leave. They're not gonna hop in their car and go somewhere. And since we have 2 semi-famous restaurants directly across the street, I'm afraid those kids, instead of hopping in their car and driving over there, will try to walk across and cross the South Loop Speedway on foot, which is like playing Frogger at a very high level. And as much as us businesses like to have attention drawn to our area, we don't really want it done with meat wagons and morgues. If you don't have enough parking, you're going to have problems. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Collier.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Once again, I'm not against the development of the property. I think it would be good for the city. It's really, once again, it's the density and compatibility. I don't want the city rushing to hit a home run and try to solve all of Tarleton's problems with one property. I think slightly less density, more distributed developments around the city would be better. Let's not try to solve the whole world's problems with one property. I'm for the development, just smartly, for the betterment of the city. That's why these compatibility and density reasons I keep bringing up. Back to so really gonna set compatibility aside, but I do think that green zone and, you know, or some kind of transition zone is important, but back to density. The property owner himself said that he respects standards and that we have to maintain standards. 2.0 is a standard for single family. There already is a lower rate, 1.5, for these types. This city has approved a standard for these types of developments, and that's 1.5. And they're asking for a significant variance, even lower than the standard for this type of development. Stillwater, Lubbock, College Station, definitely orders of magnitude larger, with larger population densities, different public transportation structures, kids utilizing electric scooters and everything else. He did not offer any comparison. I haven't seen the sheet, sorry. I don't believe he offered any similar comparisons of a town this size. We are not a large city. I like Stevensville's great the way it is. And Tarleton is doing great things for the town. What has not been mentioned so far with the 196 extra spaces, and this was mentioned at the very beginning of the meeting, there is no guarantee that there will be 100% students at this property. There is no legal, to my knowledge, legal ramification that says it has to be a student. It's going to be a big property. It's going at this proposed property will be big and fancy with pools and new amenities. Families will want to live there. They will want to rent. They will have more than one vehicle. So I understand that there's 196 guest spaces. That is not accounting for any families that buy property or rent lease space there and will have more than one vehicle. I truly believe that 196 will shrink fast. Once again, I recommend to the council that they do not approve the parking variance. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Ross McAngus, property owner. Again, it's the devil's in the details of this. It's is this student housing? Is this not? Can we confirm on that? We've also mentioned Harbin and its access to the property. Is that what this is about? We have a lion's share of the proposed parking spots not adjacent to Harbin, so we're expecting a whole lot more traffic onto Cedar, and we need to be, realize that that's a real possibility. Additionally, you have a zone of high density versus very, very low density. We need to consider a kind of buffer process. I understand that this variance isn't directly related to that, but because of the rush of this, we are basically giving way to that also. We have to consider what this domino effect will do. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McAngus. Anyone else?
I'm a property owner.
Yes, please.
Thank you. My name is Gwen Brunner Schneck, and I am the property owner. And I just felt like I need to clarify a little bit. I feel like we kind of got off on the wrong foot, that there's a rush. There is no rush. We have a contract, but those things can be dealt with. So that's not a thing. So we need to look away from that. My husband and I lived in Tempe, Arizona for 35 years. I grew up in Stephenville, Texas. I am proud to be from Stephenville, Texas. I moved back to Stephenville, Texas to retire. And I live in the rural area, so I understand rural, not wanting a bunch of people. I get it, totally. That's why I left Arizona, to get away from people. So, I was a high school educator for 35 years. My husband was an attorney. We chose to come back here. With that said, my dad, I've been here since 1969. My dad bought this land at some point during the last 50 years. It is just sitting there, and I am so sorry, Mary. I want to apologize. I laughed out loud, and I did not mean to. When you said this would be a wasted use of the land. It's been sitting empty all these years. So when we came back from big town, ASU, got a master's degree there, we've been there. We've seen the big, we've seen it. But we are hearing, since we got back, just the desperate need for not only student housing, but for family housing. And here's what's happening, and I'm not sure everybody can see it because you get a little too close to the picture. But we are outsiders looking in now. And I'm here to tell you there are families that can't rent a house because college kids are in their houses. There are single-family houses that are not being able to be used. So I dare say a family with 3 children would rather have a house to live in than an apartment, honestly. To the whole car issue, parking, you will have less, the parking, the more parking spaces, the more concrete. So I heard people say they want the prettiness, but parking. Well, you've got to find that happy medium, and that's what the developer is trying to do. As owners of this land, we eventually will sell this land. The question is to whom and what will be on it. This opportunity appeared in front of us, and it appeared to be an answer to a lot of what we see in Stephenville as need. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Oh, and Dries and Kenneth Powell went to high school with me. 6th grade, actually.
So there's a history there. Did she throw you out in a third? Is that what happened?
She's not good.
All right, thank you so much. I'll close the public hearing if I hear no more requests to speak from the community. Okay, thank you. All right. So regarding V 2024, variance number 010, do I hear a motion? Oh, Steve, you said before, I'm sorry, you said something before the meeting about negotiation about.
Yes, sir, normally,
That's,
the board is limited to the request.
Yeah.
The way the request was presented was a reduction to the 1.5. There was no
from
specification.
1.5 to 1.1.
There's no specification in the publication as to what they were requesting to reduce to. Therefore, the developer has presented you 3 different plans.
Yes.
3 plans.
Okay, I got
So
you.
that's why he
the
brought
board
that.
would have the ability to entertain one of those 3 in their decision.
In other words,
So the 1.1, 1.22, or 1.35 are our options.
as opposed to just a flat 0.41, 4% reduction. So the wording of that kind of motion, because I've made this mistake in the past, Steve, and that is, it would be something to the effect of a motion to approve, but then the numbers would be filled in there, a reduction from 1.5 to, for example, 1.22. Is that, or a motion to deny, just flat out? But if it's an motion to approve, there would need to be the stated number, or is that?
If you make a motion to reduce from the 1.5, you will have to specify
The number, yes, sir. All right. Thank you.
But how do we discuss that before we make a motion?
We don't. I'll give you a chance to think about it for a second. This is, there's this, this kind of,
I guess,
this kind of expectation that that boards should just make quick, snappy decisions, and I just don't think that. Sometimes you just got to let people think for a second and formulate a thought. And so I'm fine with someone, thinking for a little bit and then presenting a motion.
if we present a motion with a set amount, can we amend it to a separate amount? That's a rule of order question. So, for example, if the motion was to approve a variance or deny it, whatever, however they want to word it, for the 1.1, if after our discussion we're entertaining a higher or lower, can we amend it to read instead of the 1.1, 1.22, 1.35?
I believe so. Steve? I believe they can amend.
Or just make another motion, right?
I'm sorry, I was addressing the question
If-
that was
if-
coming to me, so could we repeat the
Yeah.
question, please?
If
So
she
I-
made a motion for 1.1,
Yeah.
and I said no, but I would agree with 1.3 or whatever, could we change that motion from hers if hers was denied?
Can we change
Board-
it
the board
using
can
an
actually-
amendment versus?
The board can actually discuss amongst themselves and make a decision based on whatever the final motion is. So if there's a motion, an amended motion, we have to follow Robert's Rules of Order, but you're not having to act on just one particular question.
And then that amendment would have to be voted upon in its own separate,
Exactly.
But then we'd come back to the original as amended or not.
I move.
Okay.
That we approve the variance with a 1.35 ratio. I know you need more from me. I'm not sure how much more you need.
So a reduction from.
A reduction from the 1.5 to
1.35.
1.35.
Do I hear a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Dean. All right, let's have some discussion if necessary. What's your thinking on that, Mary? Why 1.35?
Well, I don't think 1.1 is enough. With the immense scope of the project before us, I don't think 1.1 is enough. And the information that he gave us, a lot of those places are great places, and but they also all have the benefit of public transportation, which currently, apart from a shuttle that runs just from Tarleton to certain student housing facilities, and that's not even on a regular basis, that's really limited to school hours, then that's not an option for most who are living off campus. So people are going to bring their cars, and the last thing their neighbors want are people pulling up in their yards because they don't have a parking spot to visit their friend in the apartment, and they don't want to get a ticket because they don't want to park or they don't want to be towed. So like I said, 1.1 just doesn't seem like enough. I don't like the idea of losing green space by any means. But 1.1 just definitely isn't enough in my book.
I'm just gonna play the negotiation aspect of it. I have no dog in this hunt other than, I just want to give everyone a fair shot, a fair hearing. And that is 1.5 to 1.35, as opposed to what was that other one, 2.2? It seems like 1.22 is a more fair compromise between 1.1 and 1.5, more than 1.35. So, I mean, is there any way that you know, you look at it like 1.5, I like the idea of lots of green space, more green space than less. I
Mhm.
love that idea. But it's almost not worth asking for you know, like making
Yeah.
a request for a variance if you're just going down point.
Yeah,
1.5. So 1.5, I'm just
I'm
saying.
not
that
dead set. I could be convinced to
Okay.
the 122. But I
So
have a question
it's
about.
closer to a middle, I'm just,
I have kind of a question about
Yeah.
density and family. And Mr. Collier mentioned families have a bigger requirement, but I was trying to think in my neighborhood. I don't know that we actually have that kind of requirement. Can you can I ask Steve a question, Mr. Steve? Can you tell us what is the requirement for family residences for the density parking restriction requirement?
So for the parking on a multifamily, and this only moves forward if they get the rezoning to multifamily. So if this were a multifamily project, student-built, where they're leasing it by the bed, it's a 1 to 1.5 ratio. If it were not student housing, that parking requirement drops down to 2 parking spaces per dwelling. It doesn't specify per bed, it specifies per dwelling. So a 5-unit or 5-room dwelling would only be required to have 2 spaces. A 1-room dwelling would be required to have 2 spaces. But what you would see there is a pretty significant reduction in the parking requirement because it's not student-built or purpose-built housing. I guess the part to clarify there is that generally what we see when it's straight multifamily and families are living in these multifamily units, it's usually a mom, a dad, their children. And mom and dad may have 1 or 2 vehicles. So usually the parking is much less than what we see with student housing. As far as the density, I think you asked, Mary?
Yes.
The density, just to clarify on the density, multifamily allows for 24 buildings per acre. It's not necessarily based on the number of people. So the developer made a point earlier that they're at a density of, I believe, 14.
14 units per acre.
If this property were to sell to someone else and they went straight R3 zoning, they could have 24 units per acre instead of 14. So in that respect, the density
It'd be more dense.
would be higher, even though the bed count may be lower.
Not only more dense, but also less parking because
Less parking.
multifamily,
But in some respect, that may actually lead to, we're talking basically about parking taking up green space. Well, buildings take up green space as well. And then you would have the parking requirement. So thank you for asking those clarifying questions.
I'd like to move friendly, an amendment that we change the number to 1.22. But I'd have to hear a second, and then we'd
I'll
have to
second
vote.
that. I'll second
All right, thank you, Robert. Any more discussion on that? It just seems like a compromise, of the original. All right, all in favor of the amendment to move 1.35 to 1.22, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Okay. So do we need to go further on the discussion on
Motion
the original
will now
motion? We'll come
read.
back to that, which is now amended to 1.22 with an approval of the variance from 1.5 to 1.22. Do we need further discussion? Okay, I'm going to call the question. All in favor of that motion as amended, please raise your right hand, please. Okay, passed. Thank you. All right, Mr. Killen, if you present to us case number B 2024-011.
Again, same property. This is section 154.56D, paragraph D7. This is for a 5-foot variance in the 35-foot height restriction, so they would be proposing 40-foot tall buildings on the property. I'd be glad to answer any questions. Let me clarify, this is not to, this will be kept at a 3-story limit.
Okay.
But they're needing the 40-foot just based on the way that they plan to build those structures, interior finishes and things of that nature. So the additional footage is not to go to a 4th floor, which was clarified with the developer as we were preparing for the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you for that clarification. It was a question I had when I was reading the packet beforehand.
How tall does our tallest fire truck go?
Yeah, that's what I was gonna ask too.
So there's an urban legend that the 35-foot height restriction was to allow for our fire engine ladder to reach the top of the building. That's not the purpose of a ladder truck. Fire safety is much beyond the capabilities of a ladder truck. And so that was a misnomer or urban legend based on previous interpretations or prior interpretations. I don't know where it came from, but our current fire chief says that's nothing to do with fire protection or fire safety, other than, you know, of course they serve their purpose, but as you get over the 35, actually it's a 55-foot height where the building construction standards change drastically. Multifamily is going to be protected with fire sprinkler systems, and so all that comes in. There are different variables to take in consideration, but the ladder truck has nothing to do on the height of the building particularly. Very good. Thank you for that question.
Still didn't answer my question, though. You don't have to.
I'll be glad to answer the question.
You answered you answered.
Thank you, Mr. Keller.
You
I'm going
answered
to ask Rock Creek, Mr. Darwin, if you'd come up and you could maybe address any questions the board has. We know your name, and
Yeah.
but do you have any?
Tired of hearing from me?
No. We appreciate you being here, and we appreciate the Snacks for Schnitz, being here as well. So go ahead and just let us understand, help us understand this 5-foot difference, because I think a lot of people may be, like there may be some concern about, the city blight, the change to the, to the landscape and the skyline, right? So, so that, help us understand why we need that extra 5 feet of.
Yeah, and as Steve mentioned, this is not in any way a request to add an additional story. It's capped at the 3 stories, but the extra 5 feet really it's a little less exciting than the other requests. It's just so we can do 9-foot ceilings versus 8-foot ceilings. So it's purely aesthetical. And then it just gives us a little bit of playroom to raise the ceilings on each floor, and then aesthetically on the roof, it gives us a little bit more options for more ornamental roofs than just your flat line roof. So really, purely aesthetic is the reason for the request. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions from the board? Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, we'll open the public hearing. Is there anyone here? None of the letters went into specifics about the height, so I won't reiterate, highlight those. They were just, what I mentioned before was addressed, really especially about the parking concern. But is anyone here who wants to address the height issue? This variance in particular, okay?
Thank you, Steve, for that clarification. We spoke a couple weeks ago, and you did mention the possible 4th floor. So, I mean, really, with 3 floors, once again, the density's been a concern. The 3 floors, I'm 6'6". I hate 8-foot ceilings, so I really don't have an issue with it. As a property owner next door, I don't have an issue with the variance for this one. I do, if I can, I know earlier the part. I appreciate all your thoughtful consideration in the conversation. Y'all are being very thoughtful in working through this, and I do appreciate that. I don't have an issue with the height variance. The green space, parking, that can all be addressed with a reduction in units to reduce. So this is off the height variance, just for future consideration. Reducing the units, reduce the number of parking spaces, you can reestablish that green space. so there can be a compromise there. Once again, we don't have to hit a home run. It will be valuable for the community. We don't have to solve all of Charlton's problems with one singular property. Thank you very much for your consideration. Thank you for the time.
Thank you, Mr. Collier, and thank you for your very measured and reasonable presentations of opinion. We appreciate it. To all of you, thank you. Anyone else from the community for or against this variance request? Okay, thank you very much. We'll close the public hearing, and yes, Steve?
Apology for not answering the question correctly.
Oh.
I heard fire ladder, and I was like, let me fix it. So I apologize for that. The answer, which was, someone helped me out with this, 110 feet.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. You did address the concerns behind the question, so we do appreciate that.
Thank you.
Do I hear a motion regarding 2024-011?
Mr. Chair, I move to approve B 2024-011.
Thank you very much. Do I hear a second? Thank you, JJ. Any discussion regarding this height variance request? Mary?
They've assured him it's not or they've assured us here that it's not for a fourth floor, so.
Yeah.
Given that, then I don't have any concerns.
I shared the same exact question. I was looking at going.
And knowing that
Is this gonna be
it's fire
an
safe.
extra? Yeah.
So, having one already off at college and another one headed that way, I would hate to send my child to to live somewhere it was not perfectly safe, so.
Sure. Any other thoughts, comments, concerns? Okay, I'll call the question. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, same sign. All right, this variance request passes. All right, our next case. Oh, thank you all for being here. We appreciate it. All of you, yes. Thank you. Take care.
Empty house now.
And the first request that you guys asked about, it simply just says there's no variance to how many people are in the rooms, right? So it just means it still has to be no more than 3, I'm guessing? I mean.
Yeah, it would limit to 3-bedroom units.
Yeah.
Would be the limitation there.
So it's not a,
Yeah, we'll
deal.
hopefully discuss with staff and.
There you go. Thank you. We appreciate all of your input. Thank you, Mr. Collier, too. And the Schnecks. All right. Well,
Yeah. We all leave now?
all right, we're ready for the last of
We
two
have 2
cases.
more.
Yeah, I know, that one, it'll, it's
Mr. Chairman, would
nice
you
that
be
we got
willing
through
to
that.
let us address Colby since he's here and the other, or I don't see the other applicant?
I am totally fine with that, and they may actually arrive, who knows? So you're going to present to us case V 2024-013.
Yes, sir.
Thanks.
My apologies that we had you on the end of the agenda.
But it wasn't it fun?
So you
That
got
goes my
your,
best for last call, man. He just bumped you up, so.
so this is V 2024-0013, Mr. Colby Pack, representing Solid Ace Holdings, requesting a variance from 154.56D, paragraph B2. This is for the minimum lot width at 485 First Street, parcel 33557 of the South Side Edition, Block 12, Lot 5A and 6A. Mr. Pack is requesting a 12-foot variance relating to the lot width of the 75-foot requirement in order to build a 2-unit residential structure. You have seen similar structures built by Mr. Pack on other lots that he's approached the board about. This is basically, he is needing the variance because the lot does not meet the dimension that it's zoned for, which is R.1, R2. It's R2 zoning, but that requires a 75-foot wide lot, and this one only has a 63-foot frontage, so he's asking for the reduction. You might recall the same footprint that he will be building on this lot was presented to us on a previous case, and that was for side setbacks. He's not gonna need side setback reductions here. He just needs the lot width to be allowed at 63 foot. And I hope that answers the questions you may have. If not, please let me know. And thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. And so ultimately, we're at, what I'm hearing is that, Mr. Pack, you're asking for a 12-foot variance, reducing from 75 feet to 63 feet on the frontage along First Street.
Yes, sir. So basically, the duplex that I came to y'all in January, y'all can drive by and look, we're already finished, they're already moved in. The 75-foot lot, there's just not very many of them. I found this one at 64-foot lot. We don't have to have a side setback variance or anything, and we can still make it fit and still have plenty of parking, still have everything. It's just, I can't with the 75-foot.
And it's not gonna make the size of these duplexes?
No, I've got plenty of room. I've got plenty of room, and I could actually make it, the duplex wider. I'm not going to. I'm gonna leave it the same. If it's not broke, don't fix it. Everybody, all my subs know exactly what to go do. And we get it done. We built the last one in 90 days, so,
Where is the parking going on this?
in the front.
Okay.
So the house will get tore down.
Oh, okay.
And then-
Okay, so the structure we're looking at is not the.
Yes, the structure, the house, and then everything's gonna get tore down on it, unfortunately.
Okay.
You can't find anybody that wants a one-bedroom house to move, so. So we're gonna tear it down and then just build it back in the middle of the lot. Have plenty of parking in the front.
Okay.
Could you please scroll the information for us to, there you go, and increase the size? I looked at this, I had to really take some time to
It's confusing.
A little, I mean, but then, then it's like,
So-
once you figure out the bearings. then
I will say, in the old part of town, I'm surprised y'all don't see a lot more of these, because in the old part of town, there are not 75-foot lots. 75-foot lots, I mean, mostly they're 50. I was lucky to find this one at 64. And thought, man, I got lots of room, but Stephen informed me that there's a 75, and I thought, man, it shouldn't, as long as you meet your setbacks, you should be able to build, but here I am standing in front of you asking for permission.
It's a tough pill.
Well, no, I like it.
Good answer.
I like seeing y'all's faces.
Oh, careful, there's a storm out there.
All right, any questions for Colby? If I may, Colby instead of Mr. Pack?
Yes.
All right. Very good, thank you very much.
Thank
We did receive, I'm gonna open up the public hearing, and we did receive a letter in opposition to this request from Desiree Hartwigson, and who was representing Miss Cindy Kennedy, who owns the property at 1120 Swan Street here in Stephenville. And she, what it looks like is the, her main concern stems from the potential negative impacts such construction would likely impose on the surrounding residential area. And then she goes into kind of more detail about, the possibility of noise pollution, traffic congestion, and a possible rise, in crime rates. And so it was just the whole, the kitchen sink of concerns there. Could you please address the notion of at least the potential negative impacts that such construction would likely impose on the surrounding residential area? And I understand that there's a begging the question, logical fallacy in there that it doesn't necessarily likely impose anything, but that's a concern, and so.
It's a concern, and it's a concern with everybody. I mean, we own these houses ourselves. Austin Brown, he's my partner in Solid Ace Holding. We're not slumlords that's gonna be, I mean, they're well-built houses. That's all I can say. I can't guarantee that some hoodlum won't go down the street, or I can't, nobody can. But I can promise you that it's a well-built house that, it's something y'all can drive past, the one on Shirley Street that y'all approved earlier this year. It's nice looking, lots of parking. We try our best.
Cleaning up the neighborhood.
Cleaning up the neighborhood, yes. I mean, if you look at this little
Yeah.
700 square foot house that's sitting on it, I'd be scared how many people you put in it.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, if we don't hear any other citizens here to speak for or against this variance, then I'll close the public hearing.
I have a real quick question of Steve before, on that safety issue. Can you address the safety concerns in that area?
Yes, ma'am, thank you. Actually, I misspoke. It's zoned R3.
3 times in one day?
Yes,
I don't know what to
well,
do.
more than that. Yes, you should have been with me all day. It's R3 zoning, so actually a multifamily unit could be built on this lot. Future land use is R1, but R3 does require the 75-foot wide lot, which is why we're here, even for a two-family, 1 to 2 family unit. But technically, Mr. Pat could, by right, with the current property zoning, build a 5-unit structure on the property.
And as deep as that property is, don't think that it didn't cross my mind. I'm just gonna go out there and say it. But I know how to build this one really fast and really good, so.
Heard. Thank you for that clarification and correction. Boy, I don't know what to do with
You
all
need a
this
motion. You need a
humility. Do I hear a motion regarding variance request V 2024-013?
I move that we approve the variance request V 2024-0013.
Second.
Just -013.
Oh,
And that request is for a 12-foot reduction from 75 feet to 63 feet?
Yes,
Okay, so that's the motion.
that is the
And,
motion.
Any discussion?
Just to address safety concerns, it's a 1-bedroom house. It's clearly not occupied, and an occupied house is always safer than one that's sitting vacant and empty
That's
and
what insurance
unwanted.
companies
So,
say.
I think I have seen the buildings that you've developed, and I think this will be an addition, a pleasant addition to this neighborhood.
Upscale.
Yeah.
All right, I'll call the question. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign? All right, this motion passes, this variance passes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate you being here.
Thanks
All
for
right.
sitting in.
And I think the proper protocol is to go ahead and present the case, and then if applicant Renee White isn't present, then we don't go farther? Or do we just not entertain this case at all?
I believe we can move forward with the request. Let me review some. You bring up a good question there.
This one was, I thought it was an easy one, but we've always had someone representing the request. And if we didn't, then that changed what we did. Do they need to be present?
I believe you can table it because they're not present.
I'm gonna ask that we
Let's
table this one.
it, because that's let's table it.
Thanks for your approval. Do I need to move do I have to make a motion that we table it, or do we just?
Probably for safety.
Okay,
For safety.
I move that we table this this case number V 2024-012 to our next meeting, so that applicant Renee White can actually have a fair hearing as opposed to us making an uninformed decision just on the.
Second.
Thank you. Do I hear, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
None opposed. So Steve will just go ahead and table that case. And that means we will have a meeting in June.
If she could be here.
If she could be here, if we don't have other. All right, so that's the last bit of business that I saw on our agenda, and so if I,
Move that we adjourn.
all in favor, say aye, and there's none opposed.
Do we? I made notes. He didn't
Oh,
take
no.
it away from me.
No, I don't need it. You guys,
Well, I didn't want to keep anything.
yeah, well, I'm talking like things